Enter the Gorbachevs, the Soviet General Secretary, Mikhail, First Lady of the Motherland, Raisa, arriving at a U.S. NATO base here in Iceland. The style and substance of the Soviets now here in this land of fire and frost, on this, the eve of the Reagan-Gorbachev Summitry, on issues of world survival. Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting tonight again from Reykjavik, Iceland. Just a matter of miles from that NATO base, a sort of Soviet safe harbor, the Georg Otts, a Soviet passenger ship named for a popular singer known as the Frank Sinatra of the Soviet Union. This is the floating Soviet nerve center and Gorbachev residence for the time between summit talks with Ronald Reagan. CBS News Moscow correspondent Wyatt Andrews has traveled here to Iceland, and he begins our coverage tonight of Gorbachev's arrival, smiling and enthusiastic, prepping and sparring for tomorrow's summitry.
Gorbachev arrived in Reykjavik sounding far more optimistic than the Reagan administration about the outlook for this two-day summit. He promised to search for solutions to what he called the world's burning problems, and in a gesture of conciliation, said he was satisfied with President Reagan's pre-summit speech from yesterday.
If I understood him correctly, it is not a bad beginning for our talks.
The open style continued with small talk during a courtesy call on Iceland's president. With his wife, Raisa, beside him, it seems to be Gorbachev's intention to raise expectations for this summit. For Gorbachev, this is the summit he requested, proof he can deal with President Reagan. To Soviet experts, it seems clear Gorbachev needs success here in Reykjavik, not only because the chances for an arms control agreement seem close, but also because Gorbachev needs to look good at home. Back in the Soviet Union, Gorbachev's drive to reform the Soviet economy is stalled. This year, in his speeches, Gorbachev has openly complained that a privileged elite, used to the old ways of working, is blocking his ideas. Soviet spokesmen in Reykjavik confirm Gorbachev has domestic problems.
The resistance to change is really quite serious. To some, change takes away authority and privileges.
In Reykjavik, the Soviet media are out in force, giving blanket coverage to Mr. Gorbachev's every move. Gorbachev needs a show of progress overseas to boost his stature in Moscow.
He needs it to prove to the people who have been fighting against him that he is now in the league of the big boys.
For Gorbachev, it means that anything short of a walkout will be a success. The irony of Reykjavik will be that when Reagan, the leader of the free world, meets Gorbachev, the autocrat, it will be Gorbachev who most needs the publicity back home. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Reykjavik.
CBS News White House correspondent Bill Plant has the latest now on President Reagan's final push before the summit.
Despite the fact the White House has consistently played down expectations, Ronald Reagan does not plan to leave Reykjavik without some headlines of his own. Mr. Reagan, visiting Iceland's President Vigdis Finnbogadóttir, didn't argue with Gorbachev's optimism.
Bill, I hope their hopes are realized.
They said today that they thought, he said as he arrived, he thought that if you meant what you said yesterday, that you could do business.
I did mean it, yes.
And can you do business?
I'm sure going to find out.
Mr. Reagan will tell the nation what he finds out next Monday night in an address from the Oval Office or in Congress, depending on just how well things go. The president late today settled his running battle with Congress over restrictions on arms control attached to a spending bill. The compromise drops a requirement that Mr. Reagan abide by the weapons limits of the expired SALT II treaty in exchange for a promise to move toward a step-by-step elimination of nuclear testing.
The action this evening unties the president's hands to deal effectively with the Soviet Union.
So the stage is set in this stark island nation for Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev to decide whether they can make enough progress on arms control to justify a full-scale summit in the U.S. sometime soon.
And we remain, of course, ready to receive proposals for a date. We don't come seeking one and really don't expect one at this time.
In fact, officials tell CBS News that there is already preliminary agreement that the U.S. summit will be held in March or April, if the leaders agree. Among the other items certain to be discussed by Mr. Reagan, Afghanistan, where specialists say there is real possibility of some Soviet move to mollify world opinion and ease their losses, and human rights. Relatives of two prominent Soviet refuseniks confronted Soviet officials at a news conference today. The Soviets responded by walking out.
I'm trying to get my parents out.
Ronald Reagan goes into this meeting believing he has little to lose, despite the fact that he's been criticized for being here. His advisors are telling him that Gorbachev is counting on bringing home agreements of some kind and that therefore Mr. Reagan holds the high cards. Other voices are warning him to be wary. Officials say the president will follow his own instincts. Bill Plant, CBS News, with the president in Reykjavik.
There is the history yet to be written of this summit starting tomorrow. There is already the history and the summit that brought these two leaders to Reykjavik. They left the chill of Geneva with a warm glow, a feeling President Reagan carried back to Congress.
It's my hope that our fireside summit in Geneva, Mr. Gorbachev's upcoming visit to America, can lead to a more stable relationship.
But it hasn't worked out that way. No surprise to previous summit participants.
We tend to assume that the cordial atmosphere of the summit reflects the reality of the relationship. It doesn't.
No surprise to the Soviets, who say they think relations haven't gotten better, but worse.
Primarily, since Geneva, they've seen a whole series of American provocations directed against them.
The air raids on Libya were strikes not just against alleged terrorist targets, but also against a Soviet friend. Gorbachev charged the United States with attempting to, quote, replace the principles of international coexistence with the law of the jungle. After the Soviets unilaterally called off nuclear testing, the Americans went ahead with an underground test in Nevada. And President Reagan declared that he no longer would observe the SALT II arms limitation agreement.
But we can't go on unilaterally observing this while they take off on their own with the violations that they've already made and probably more to come.
40 years of Cold War suspicions have not thawed. When the Chernobyl disaster was kept secret for 2.5 days, American mistrust intensified. The Danilov-Sakharov affair poisoned any remaining air left unpolluted.
It is only during the last few weeks that all of a sudden, with the new non-summit in Iceland, both sides have been singing a much more harmonious tune.
Singing in harmony this weekend seems an impossible goal. Being in the same room, not fighting, is an accomplishment. And what can the world expect from here? The Soviets say a lot. The Americans say a little. And historians who have studied the 12 previous summits since World War II?
The only thing that these meetings can do is increase marginally, little by little each time, the extent to which one side understands the views of the other side.
Historians writing 50, 75, 100 years from now will say that at these summits, for the most part, the participants spun their wheels.
But that may not be so bad in a nuclear world which could not just change history, but end it.
Aretha Franklin eats Kellogg's cornflakes. The Queen of Soul? Yes. Pink Cadillac? Yes. Kellogg's cornflakes? Yes.
How about those Kellogg's cornflakes now?
It's Sears' biggest hardware sale of the year. These Craftsman screwdriver, plier, and wrench sets, now just $19.99 each. Choose a Craftsman stapler or heavy-duty glue gun, $9.99 each. And this 99-piece mechanics tool set, only $88. Better hurry. Sears National Hardware Sale ends October 11th.
There's more for your life
in our new century.
At Sears.
It's time to change your light bulb. Philips Longer Life square bulbs last 33% longer than ordinary round bulbs.
By most accounts, the United States and the Soviet Union either already have reached or are very close to an arms control agreement in one area, intermediate-range nuclear missiles. This may be a prime subject at the summit starting here at Humpty House tomorrow. CBS News Pentagon correspondent David Martin looks at these missiles, the deal, and why the deal has been so difficult.
A cruise missile launcher breaks out of its camouflage netting and raises into firing position. One of this country's so-called intermediate-range nuclear weapons.
This is Fort Huachuca, Arizona, where Air Force crews train with ground-launched cruise missiles before being sent to Europe. But now, because of what appears to be a major Soviet concession, some of them may never get there.
The Soviets have offered to make drastic cuts in their intermediate-range missile, the SS-20, which carries 3 nuclear warheads and is targeted on Europe.
If they do, it will be the first time in arms control that they will have discarded or dismantled a modern system.
Under the Soviet proposal, the number of SS-20 warheads within range of Europe would be reduced to 100. In return, the U.S. would have to cut its intermediate-range missiles in Europe to 100. Still to be negotiated, how many of those 100 American missiles would be cruise missiles, which fly no faster than an airplane, and how many would be these rocket-powered Pershing missiles, which can hit targets deep inside the Soviet Union with less than 15 minutes warning. And that's only one of the sticking points.
Within about 200 yards of here, there are 16 cruise missile launchers. But unless your eyes are better than mine, you can't see them from here. And that's one of the major remaining obstacles to an agreement.
Both the American and the Soviet missiles are easy to hide and easy to move. SS-20s based in Asia, for instance, could be quickly transported to within range of Europe. Defense Secretary Weinberger has said arms factories must be open to inspection to guard against Soviet cheating.
Even then, you can't be wholly sure, but you have to have far more reliable verification measures than we've ever had before.
European governments, which weathered strong political protests to get the American missiles in the first place, are beginning to wonder what's in it for them. The present Soviet offer does nothing to limit Moscow's host of shorter-range nuclear missiles, which can still hit Europe.
Soviet renunciation of the SS-20 threat is not really eliminating the threat from West Germany.
2 years ago, the Soviets stormed out of the arms control talks to protest the arrival of the first intermediate-range missiles in Europe. And demonstrators still throw things at Americans bringing in cruise missiles. But for the moment, it seems, the missiles which were so hard to get in may be the easiest to get out. David Martin, CBS News, Fort Huachuca, Arizona.
The Russians, as we know, tend to think in terms of long-range strategy. CBS News national affairs correspondent Leslie Stahl has been looking into President Reagan's overall arms control strategy. She reports from Iceland tonight on whether and how his strategy might be changing.
White House officials say Gorbachev will face a converted Ronald Reagan, committed to reaching arms control agreements.
The president believes, as anyone as self-confident as he is, that he could probably get a better deal than anyone else.
On top of that, say the officials, Nancy is pushing for an agreement, and the president hears the clock ticking.
He wants to go down in the history books as having done something to change the relationship with the Soviet Union.
The president's advisors have told him to negotiate now before cuts in defense spending take hold, and that since he's been in office, the number of Soviet warheads aimed at U.S. land-based missiles has doubled, while the number of U.S. missiles has actually shrunk.
The gap would widen, and that's one of the reasons that he is so determined to get an arms control agreement.
The skeptics question whether the president has bought these arguments. If he has, they ask, why does the squabbling persist between the pro-arms control faction led by the Secretary of State and the hardliners led by the Secretary of Defense?
If you were really serious about arms control and really interested in the subject, he would have resolved the split long ago.
And the doubters ask, why is he trying to scrap the treaties that exist, SALT II and ABM? So, has the president, in his own mind, finally come down on the side of the pro-arms controllers?
No, I don't think so, and it's going to take more time before he settles on what's best.
Will the president take the time? His pollsters have told him that what the American people want is not so much an agreement as a president who keeps talking to the Soviets and who looks as though he's trying. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, Reykjavik.
I work hard at my job, so I put a lot of effort into keeping fit and staying healthy. And I'm careful about the medicines I take. I use Tylenol caplets. I was first given Tylenol in the hospital after I hurt my back. It relieved the pain without upsetting my stomach like aspirin did. Later, I found out that Tylenol is the pain reliever hospitals use most. Well, if hospitals trust Tylenol, that makes me confident that it's right for me.
Trust Tylenol, the pain reliever hospitals use most.
The amazing Isuzu Trooper 2. Its four-wheel drive can take you anywhere. In fact, I drove it up here myself. It has more seats than the Astrodome, plus enough cargo space to carry Texas. And Isuzu will accept marbles and seashells as payment, but they're selling fast, so you have to come in 5 minutes. You have my word on it.
Right now, your local Isuzu dealer is offering great deals on 2- and 4-door Trooper 2s.
An earthquake today in El Salvador has caused heavy damage. Some deaths and injuries also are reported. Late reports from the capital city of San Salvador say many buildings collapsed. One radio report said 30 people were killed, most of them children, when one building came down. Hospitals are treating many injured people. Patients were reported lying on mattresses in the parking lot outside one hospital. The government put out an urgent call for doctors and nurses. A spokesman at the U.S. Embassy said no Americans were hurt there. He did say there was substantial damage in the area and that streets were impassable. This quake was centered off the coast of El Salvador. Scientists in the United States measured it at 5.4 on the Richter scale, officially a moderate earthquake. The bodies of 2 Americans killed in the crash of a rebel supply plane arrived back from Nicaragua today. The question of who in the U.S. government was behind the flight remains unanswered. But today, one report linked the operation to Vice President George Bush. CBS News correspondent Eric Ingberg reports from Washington.
As the bodies of the dead Americans arrived in Miami, Vice President George Bush, campaigning in Florida, was thrust into the burgeoning controversy over who had paid them to run guns to the conference. A San Francisco newspaper today quoted an intelligence source as saying Bush had personally set up the program and hired an ex-CIA agent to go to El Salvador to run it. Bush's press secretary, in a carefully worded statement, answered that neither the vice president nor anyone on his staff is directing or coordinating an operation in Central America. That left open the question of who hired the gun runners. Intelligence sources told CBS News that military aid to the Nicaraguan rebels, including the failed mission, is supervised directly in the White House by members of the president's national security staff.
CBS News has been told that former NSC staffer Donald Gregg, the vice president's national security advisor, has personally administered covert aid activities.
In Iceland, White House spokesman Larry Speaks continued to deny government involvement in the downed aircraft affair. In Congress, the mood turned more hostile as senators on both sides of the aisle demanded answers from the top.
I think the White House knows, has not been telling the world, and probably should at some point.
There are people within the reaches of the administration, in other words, the National Security Council and people who've worked in connection with them, who have also violated those laws.
The Nicaraguans today said they will try Eugene Hasenfus, the only survivor of the plane crash. They allowed him to meet for the first time with U.S. State Department officials. Eric Engberg, CBS News, Washington.
The sharpest increase in gasoline prices in a year and a half pushed wholesale prices up 0.4% last month. It was the second wholesale increase in a row after a period of general declines. At the National Archives building in Washington today, a man wielding a hammer attacked the display case containing the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Despite some broken glass, the documents were not damaged. The attacker was wrestled to the ground and arrested.
How do you give wood furniture a moisturized shine? At Doyle Galleries, where you see only the finest wood, we've found something very special. Old English aerosol furniture polish. Old English moisturizing brings out the best in wood.
Managing information means storing it, finding it, and moving it from A to B. When that meant linking 800 miles of Alaskan pipeline, they called Contel. When it meant matching orders to inventory at the Stoneham Lumber Company, they called Contel. Small business or tall order, Contel can help you manage information better, too. For Contel, I'm Charlton Est.
Tums doesn't have it. Rolaids doesn't have it. Maalox Plus does. We have what you need for complete relief of excess acid, heartburn, and gas. Maalox for acid and heartburn, plus simethicone for gas. Get complete relief. Try Maalox Plus.
In the Reykjavik city square tonight, a candlelight vigil in the rain. Up to 1,000 people turning out to pray for peace and success at the summit. For his commentary tonight, CBS News correspondent Bill Moyers looks beyond the wishing and the hoping to the real possibility. Bill?
Thank you, Dan. Before they even say hello tomorrow, President Reagan and Secretary Gorbachev are reaping political benefits from being here. The president heads off a move in Congress to seize the initiative on arms control. He diverts from page one the controversy over swapping an American journalist for a Soviet spy. And on the eve of congressional elections, he demonstrates concern over nuclear weapons despite his massive buildup of the last 5 years. Mr. Gorbachev shows himself every bit Ronald Reagan's equal in one-upmanship. The president rejected the idea of this interim meeting when the Russian first proposed it, but Mr. Gorbachev manipulated the Danilov affair to get what he wanted anyway. He has critics in the Kremlin who say last year's talks in Geneva were more smoke than substance. They want results. Some agreement pulling missiles out of Europe would help the Soviet Union standing there, and Mr. Gorbachev is also pressing for a total test ban treaty. If he doesn't like what he hears this weekend, he can go home to say, well, there's no use for a summit later in Washington. But it's not enough that the two leaders benefit politically. The danger of summitry is that it stops there, confusing relations between the two countries as merely the fortune and fate of their governors. Truth is, the chemistry between these two men is the best hope there is to achieve a breakthrough. Their armies will tell them to beware, the hardliners will say no, and there are forces of inertia in each country. It has to be kept in mind that the two are rivals divided by deep historical and ideological differences. Gorbachev and Reagan are politicians, born and bred in wholly different worlds. They're patriots, too, sworn to defend their countries. All of this makes it harder to pierce the status quo and change it. But if these two men can't do it, no one can.
Raisin Nut Bran. Took the wrinkles out of raisins and the blah out of bran.
Hey, my raisin's got nuts on it.
Look at my nutty tail. We took raisins plump and juicy and rolled them with nuts. They said we couldn't do it, but...
Nut-covered raisins. So that's why it's better.
People like Raisin Nut Bran better than ordinary Raisin Brans because our raisins aren't ordinary. They're plump, tender, and the wrinkles are filled with nuts.
They took the wrinkles out of raisins and the plum out of bran.
Raisin Nut Bran.
The parents of these kids have very different jobs, but when Dean Witter helps manage their investments, they're all treated the same. Special.
Everybody is somebody at Dean Witter.
A member of the Sears Financial Network.
As your life changes, your needs change. That's why you'll find experts in investments and real estate and insurance together at the Sears Financial Network. Come to a center at Sears or a member office for advice you can trust.
Everybody needs a Yugo sometime.
I bought my Yugo because now I can afford a brand new car.
I think it's fun to drive, and it beats my old carpool.
I like the rack and pinion steering and the front-wheel drive.
We wanted a dependable second car.
And this Yugo's just what we need.
See the car you need at the price you want, $39.90. Call 1-800-USA-YUGO for the dealer nearest you.
Everybody needs a Yugo sometime.
Yugo, $39.90.
In a best-selling book and in real life, Iceland, as CBS News correspondent Steve Koff tells us now, is a Cold War hotspot.
It may look like worthless real estate, but for Soviet and American servicemen, this is part of the front line.
Multiple contacts.
They're constantly watching and probing each other here, listening for electronic footsteps. But that's the sound of a runaway bestseller, not a Russian submarine. While most of the world is reading about diplomacy in Reykjavik this week, others are snapping up copies of the grisly alternative. Red Storm Rising is about World War III, and much of it takes place right where Reagan and Gorbachev are meeting.
For the Soviets to get their submarines into the North Atlantic, they have to pass Iceland.
In Tom Clancy's book, the Keflavik airstrip, where President Reagan and General Secretary Gorbachev landed, is captured by Russian commandos during the first day of the war. In a stunning defeat for the Americans, the Russians destroy the control tower, along with that Esso station right over there.
It kind of brings a chill up your spine. You know?
I didn't realize they attacked Iceland right away in the book. Oh, well. Were there prisoners?
Over the years, World War III has become synonymous with Armageddon. But in Red Storm Rising, the nuclear genie stays in the bottle. just as it does in the real-life scenarios of many top Soviet and American strategists.
A lot of critics are actually disappointed that we didn't use nuclear weapons, and you got to wonder where their heads are at.
The heroes of Clancy's book are high-tech, microchip, fiber-optic, laser-guided weapons. It's World War II with touch-tone and direct long-distance dialing. A video game war where fighters commence firing 10 miles away and never see their prey. Discriminating, efficient death by remote control, but no less terrifying than Armageddon. But those weapons are not on the bargaining table, and the ones that are strategically redundant and won't affect the balance of terror one way or the other.
What's important is usually non-negotiable. What is negotiable is usually unimportant. And if by some miracle you find something which is important and negotiable, usually you cannot verify it.
Instead, this is an exercise in a very human quality, trust, to see if two enemies can agree on anything and then follow through. And like the men in the deadly machines they command in and around Iceland, they'll be probing, trying to gauge weakness, anticipate response. Only tomorrow, it will be face-to-face. Steve Croft, CBS News, Reykjavik, Iceland.
Tomorrow, Act 1 of the summit. Some closing thoughts on the night before. The talk of Reykjavik today included this question. Why? Why did Gorbachev insist on this summit? Among the most popular, though not necessarily the only answer, he wants a guarantee of an arms control deal to sign at a Washington summit. And in return for that, the talk goes, Gorbachev has come here with a sweetener's surprise. Maybe an offer on Afghanistan and or the Middle East. Also the talk in Reykjavik today, a memory of a long ago, faraway Yalta. A memory of a cold place, another summit, an American president in his final years, a deal and regrets in many places years later. And then there's Raisa, playing the full part and partner today. No matter how you feel about her, an asset to the Soviet Union and to the leader of the Soviet Union. The summit story will begin unfolding in a matter of hours. We'll be here through the weekend to report all we can. Dan Rather in Reykjavik, Iceland. We'll see you here again tomorrow.
There are lots of furnaces you can choose for your home. But for the most efficient energy, forget all but the gas furnaces. And to cut energy costs further, consider only the high-efficiency gas furnaces. Of those, only one has advanced pulse technology, the Lennox Pulse Furnace. It will make your heating more efficient.
Take it from Dave Lennox. You can save a lot of gas with a Pulse.
Attaboy, Dave!
Gas, America's best energy value.
When you need a laxative, you want your mom. This mom. Phillips Milk of Magnesia. M-O-M. Phillips gives you easy relief, not harsh. Mom knows what's good for you. Nobody treats you better than Mom.
We asked 1,000 doctors if stranded on an island, which would they want? Tylenol, extra strength Tylenol, Advil, or Bayer? More doctors chose Bayer, nearly 2 to 1 over extra strength Tylenol. Bayer, the wonder drug that works wonders.
It's Sears' biggest hardware sale of the year, with savings on hundreds of items. Save $20 on a Craftsman 8-inch table saw, 10-inch bandsaw, or belt disc sander. Your choice, $99.99. This Craftsman tool chest and roll-away combo, or wet and dry vac with accessory tote, also $99.99 each. Better hurry. Sears National Hardware Sale ends October 11th. There's more for your life in our new century.
At Sears.
Two of the game's most explosive quarterbacks, Michigan State's Dave Yarima, Michigan's Jim Harbaugh. Look to the skies tomorrow on CBS Sports.
This is CBS.
I'm Gene Siskel. And I'm Roger Ebert. This week we'll review Jumpin' Jack Flash, starring Whoopi Goldberg as a computer programmer who gets involved with a spy ring.
Let's go, let's go!
Shut up! Sit back. Relax.
Also, Marlee Matlin is deaf and William Hurt is in love with her in Children of a Lesser God. That's this week on Siskel and Ebert and the Movies.
See Siskel and Ebert and the Movies, Sunday at 10:45 on 11.
This is KHOU-TV, Houston. And now, 11 News at 6.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. There have been 2 strong earthquakes in Central America today, and Houstonians are trying to help out. Those 2 earthquakes wrecked several buildings in the El Salvador capital, San Salvador. Details remain sketchy at this hour as phone and other communication lines have been disrupted. One radio report monitored in Guatemala says hundreds of people have been killed.